Detective, thanks for sharing with me. I loved the phone conversation that we had. You know, you were at the antique show, living life, but internalizing something that really never goes away. And I want to start there. You say you still have treatment to this day thanks to the city of Orlando. How important is that to you?
Yes, well, good morning. Thank you for having me. It's extremely important. It's important for my continued health care. So the city of Orlando and I have come to an agreement where they are continue to support me in my mental health care as I go through post-retirement. So without that, there's a good chance that I could relapse into some of the behaviors and things that I've had to experience over the last several years.
I loved everything you said. We should have had that conversation taped. You made a great illustration. Guys in war, they'll be there maybe 6 months and see some horrible things. But you guys, it's a career. It's a span of 24 years or so, maybe longer. Is there sort of a build-up for each person? I suppose it's different for each person, but is there a build-up and that final trigger that sets you over the edge?
Well, absolutely. And we don't know what that final trigger could ever be. As we spoke about our soldiers who go overseas and fight in wars, they're exposed to a massive amount of trauma in a very relatively short period of time. Whereas law enforcement, firefighters, EMTs, first responders, we are experiencing trauma on a daily basis for 20, 25, 30 years. And it's cumulative, excuse me.
That's okay.
And it's just one day, it might hit. It might just be the breaking point for us. And we might go home and just lose it and start crying. We might go home and start drinking alcohol in excess, which was one of my faults. Or sadly enough, we might go home and kill ourselves.
Did you consider that?
Yes, I've actually taken 3 attempts on my life.
What was pushing you? Was it depression? Was it something you were reliving all over and over and over? Tell me.
So I'm diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder, major depressive disorder, and alcoholism. The depression grabs and holds you. And my answer was alcohol. The alcohol was to take me out of reality so I could forget what's going on. And when you start mixing all of these things together, it's not a good recipe. And so I would get to a point where I felt there was no other option other than to end my pain, end the nightmares, end the constant stigma that I feel that I live with, the stares that I feel that I receive every single day, and just the mental health troubles that I have to deal with, the roller coaster rides up and down. So ultimately, it was a decision that I made that I just wanted to end my life to end the pain.
Did you actually plan in your mind, I think this is how I'm going to escape? I got to get out of this?
So, no, these were relatively spontaneous attempts. My third and final one did put me into the hospital for alcohol and pills, significant amounts of both. And then from there, I received additional follow-up treatment to include a residential in-house treatment facility.
What were the triggers for you?
So my triggers are really crowds, right? I don't deal very well with crowds, but I can control that. But it's not being in control is one of my biggest ones. So as a law enforcement officer, we're in control. And when my mind is racing and the thoughts, the dreams, nightmares, my experiences, having to have gone through the lawsuit with the city of Orlando over Pulse, everything just kind of culminates and you feel like you just can't get out from underneath those.
That lawsuit, was it eating away at you?
Oh, absolutely. It was a 2-year ordeal where I was smeared by a certain lawyer who chose to make up aspects of the Pulse Nightclub shooting and wanted to sensationalize it for his benefit.
But it was a rifle versus a handgun. I mean, you did the right thing.
Absolutely, and I have no problem with any actions or inactions that I took that night. There was no thought process that I had to go through. I just acted. So I was not worried about my own self. I was not worried about what would happen. I was worried about ending the situation as quickly as possible.
I don't want to dwell on that. I want to dwell on how you were mentally surviving, because now and I talk to you, I'm talking to a guy that sounds happy, and you believe in yourself again, don't you?
Depends.
Really?
Yes, absolutely. I have good days and I have bad days. And I am working to increase those good days over those bad days. And when I know I'm having a bad day, I am able to start to recognize it and start implementing things in my day. Going for a long walk with my dog, doing some of my art painting. Something that does take my mind away from the bad day, but doesn't include alcohol, drugs, pills, any of that.
And what are the conversations you have with the psychiatrist? Does he suggest these things, these outlets?
Oh, absolutely. So I still, to this day, see my psychiatrist. I still see my counselor each month, several times a month. And we talk about that. We talk about what are my outlets? How can I prepare myself when I start to feel myself go downhill? And those are all outlets that both express to me are healthy and not harmful to me.
Talking to a psychiatrist and a counselor, does it really help?
Absolutely. I have never had an issue with saying I see a psychiatrist, because there is no stigma there for me. There is a stigma for a lot of first responders. But for me, I have found this is what I need to continue my life in a healthy way. And then when I go to my counselor, she supplements the psychiatrist with other ideas, or just sometimes allow me to get things off my chest.
And it helps?
Absolutely.
I just want people watching to realize it does help. You shouldn't be embarrassed, should you?
No. One of the challenges I had concerning the Pulse Nightclub shooting and the aftermath of it was I was really constrained by the events, the litigation, the investigations, and so I wasn't able to speak freely of what happened that night. It took over 2+ years before I was able to start speaking with other individuals, so as not to jeopardize any investigations, any litigations. And that actually was counterintuitive. It hurt me because I needed to get it out.
Yeah.
And the only outlet was my wife, and she could only handle so much.
How are you holding up today?
I struggle.
Do you?
I do.
So it's not a happy ending. You're living with this day in, day out.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. It's not a you get a retirement package or you receive some sort of benefit and everything's happy. No, this is going to be a long-term process. And again, it's a matter of extending those periods of happy days and minimizing those down days. Just like anybody in the world who may not have experienced a trauma will have a down day. My down days just are a little bit more significant for me.
In what way?
There's not a day I don't go by without thinking about the folks of Pulse, the victims who have passed away, the victims who were injured, the victims who were just there and had to experience it. And they come to me throughout the days, in the nights. I'll wake up in the middle of the night with nightmares. And these are things I've accepted. I've accepted that this is going to be part of how I move forward, but how do I deal with it? In what way do I deal with it? And so, again, it's more of expanding those good days, minimizing those bad days, and finding what I need to do to keep myself from really going downhill on a bad day.
The question I asked everyone that I talked to in law enforcement, the first responders I worked with, that I think resonated in Tallahassee was, is PTSD real? Remember that skepticism you faced, so many of us faced, including me as the reporter. But when you talk to people and look them in the eye, you know it's real, but you're living it. What would you tell the people that are still doubting?
Oh, I can equate it to back injuries. If you've never had a back injury, you wouldn't understand. I can bend over and pick up a 25-pound box and then turn around and pick up a 5-pound box and have to fall over. And they're like, oh, you're faking it. because they can't see the injury. They can't feel the injury. PTSD is the same way. They can't see it. They can't feel it. They're not living it. Until they live it or have to live with somebody or know somebody within their family that's dealing with it, that's when they start to see it. That's when they start to understand, wow, this really is real. And what can we do to help support the person? And then now with the help of yourself and then the Bickler and Longo attorney group, expand the help. Different services, different groups. One of the things we're challenged with is realizing that there are services out there, be it right now minimal, but understanding these services. There's a service that helped me greatly out of Brevard County called Survive First. They were a phenomenal help, and to this day, I speak to them on a weekly basis.
That's fantastic. What I like is you talk to men and women that are dealing with this right now on the phone, and sometimes you just listen. So I think that tells me there are people dealing with this right now and they're not quite sure who to talk to or where to go. Do you find that the conversations you have with them benefit them?
Oh, of course. We need to get things off our chest. We need to be able to express them and verbalize them. One way to express myself is I'll journal, and that's cathartic for me. It starts to change my mood. Same thing when you're talking with a friend or somebody who understands you and understands where you're coming from. I'm able to just listen to somebody and not have to say a single word, and they can just talk for 20, 30 minutes. And then I can say, I understand.
One of the things that caught my attention while we were talking here is you said you had to wait a long period of time to get those benefits. Is the PTSD law, was it good? Is it good that we had it in place? Did we achieve something for first responders?
Oh, absolutely. The law is phenomenal for recognizing a non-physical injury, which is very important. The only way we used to be able to get benefits was through a physical injury that a doctor could see or diagnose. Now the law allows for PTSD to be diagnosed through the care of physicians and psychiatrists, and then the process of vetting that diagnosis, ensuring that it is, applicable to the person, and then we receive what help we need. There's no gain for me. I didn't turn and become a lottery winner because of that law. What that law did is it gave me the resources and the assistance I needed. And I ended up retiring after 20 years with the City of Orlando Police Department. Without that law, I would have had to continue to go back to work.
And that's what I was going to ask you. You wanted to go back because you love what you did, but you couldn't handle it.
Correct. I would love to work today, but I know I can't because I did go back to work, and it was not healthy for me. I was drinking excessive amounts of alcohol every single night after getting home from work, trying to work, trying to balance my family life. And eventually my drinking caught up to me. I had to go to my command staff and tell them I'm seeking counsel or care, and went to a in-house facility in Texas called Warrior's Heart, who only deal with soldiers and first responders and alcoholism or drug dependency, along with PTSD.
And did that help? The team there helped?
They did. I was actually there twice because after leaving the first time, I didn't have the right mindset. I told myself, okay, I can drink responsibly now. And there's no such thing. Not for a person who becomes dependent on alcohol. And so I ended up going back a second time in a different mindset, understanding alcohol can never enter my life again. And with all of those challenges, there's just no way for me to go back to work and be a successful law enforcement officer to serve the city of Orlando, because they can't count on me in that stage. They don't know what's going to happen that day. And so the city of Orlando, the city of Orlando Police Department, and I all came to agreement. It was time for me to retire after 20 years of service.
You miss it?
Absolutely. My son currently works for the city of Orlando Police Department, and I kind of live vicariously through him.
Any regrets?
No. The regrets I have are really for my family, because they suffered. They had to see Dad passed out in the backyard. They had to see Dad go to Texas twice for rehab. My wife had to see her husband in a psych ward here in Orlando. I was Baker acted because of my suicidal attempt. My wife had to do a lot of work for me on my end, because I just wasn't in the shape to do it. I wasn't able to find these resources. Again, she found the Survive First Foundation in Brevard County, which is run by a retired law enforcement officer, and she found the Warrior's Heart program. I wasn't in a physical shape to do any of that.
The alcohol was what? Numbing the pain?
Yes. The alcohol was my solution to the problem, but became a problem.
And the triggers just wouldn't go away? Was there one that you remember over and over again, and that's the one that you said, I got to have another drink, I can't take this?
No, it's more cumulative.
It is.
It is. For me, it's more cumulative. There's not one particular thing that will kind of ignite it. It will maybe start with a nightmare the night before, and then the thoughts of, I'm not worthy, I'm not good enough, right? Mm-hmm. I didn't do enough that night. I should have been the one that died, nobody else. And so what will happen is all of those thoughts will start to kind of snowball and just keep going and grow and grow and grow to the point where I just go to the cabinet and get my drink of choice out.
And the conversations you have on the phone, are they similar to what you're sharing with me right now? These guys that you're helping? Are there fears? Are there triggers? How do you get out of this? What are the kinds of things you talk about?
Almost every one of them I talk to, alcohol is the number one commonality. They all go to alcohol. It's celebrated in our society. It's openly available, and it's not looked at as a negative thing. So we all turn to it very quickly. And several of them that I talk to are still on the job, and they're struggling not only with the alcohol, but they're struggling with the family. There might be separations that are occurring between the husband and wife, and that hurts us. There's going to be obviously a lot of tension within the home. And then they go back to work the next day. And they have to try to forget about what happened at home. It just doesn't happen. And so, unfortunately, quite often, they'll get caught up in some sort of incident in the job. They'll make a mistake. They'll do something wrong. And then that's what exposes everything that they're dealing with. It's only until a negative thing occurs do they start to realize what's behind the door.
Does your family come with you for some of these sessions? Or is it just you and the doctor?
So no, it's just me. I've been very open with our children about where Dad has gone and what he has struggled with. And then my wife sees her own individual person, because it's important for her to have her own outlet, not tied to me, right? Because what will happen is it'll all become about me, and then she kind of fades away. So it's important she has her own outlet. There are benefits to group therapy. It's just an individual, determination.
What can we do to make the PTSD law better? I mean, you would know better than anybody. You saw the stumbling blocks you faced. What can I do to make it better?
Well, I think it's going to be first, the timetable of reporting this non-physical injury, a mental health injury. Right now we're constrained to, I believe, 1 year. PTSD doesn't just show up. It's not like a broken bone or a back injury, like all of a sudden, oh, ow, I hurt myself, I need to go to the doctor. It could sit and simmer and simmer and simmer for a very long time until all of a sudden, one incident really just triggers it. And now let's say that incident was 1 week past that report and timetable. It's just not fair. It's been there the whole time, just hasn't been exposed. So I think that's probably one of the biggest things. The availability of resources would be another. Maybe some sort of collection of information in some sort of database or office or however they could do it, because we do have phenomenal resources. We have foundations, we have University of Central Florida has the program out there, but it takes the individual to have to search and look for these things. But when I'm struggling, when I'm drinking, I'm not looking. And all of that goes to the family. Now let's take a young officer who doesn't have a family.
Right.
He's not married, he has no children. His parents live out of state. He's just gonna struggle until one day we find him dead.
When did you get the courage to say, I've got to talk to somebody about this? Push the alcohol aside and say, I got to tell somebody, listen, I'm in trouble.
Well, I've always been open with myself, right? So I've always known, okay, I need to do this. It really didn't come to light until after my first suicide attempt. And that's when my wife was like, you're going somewhere, you're getting help, I don't care. And so it really took somebody outside of myself. And quite often that's what it is. It takes a person outside to come and say, what can I do for you? How can I be there for you? Not necessarily tell them, hey, you're going to a psychiatrist or you're going to a residential treatment facility. It's more of, how can I be there for you? What can I do? Can I find resources for you? Can I bring in these people for you? And oftentimes, the first responders are very reluctant because they don't trust the system. They're very worried about losing their job. They're worried about losing their position within the agency. Maybe a special assignment they're on. And so they're reluctant. And so it takes time for me to sit there and say, when you're ready, let me know. And then just check in. I have somebody that does that with me about every week.
Checks in and say, you okay?
Yes.
So let me check in. Are you okay?
I am okay. The last week was a struggle. The nightmares decided to kind of rear their ugly head for some reason, and there's no rhyme or reason for me. And so I didn't sleep last week. But last night, they went away. So I got a great night's sleep. And so, again, it's an acknowledgement of knowing when I'm having a bad day and then how to change it. Either reaching out, walking the dog, doing my art, an outlet that takes me away from me.
And the nightmares, any theories? Last week, sleepless. Last night, you slept great. What happened?
Well, I don't watch the news anymore, mainly because of what we're seeing in society. Mass shootings, nonstop, right? And that's definitely a triggering point for me. So I prefer to read my news versus having to watch it and then see the video that they're showing of people running, because that'll relapse me into my memories. And so it just depends. There's not just one thing, right? It's not like stepping on a nail and saying, ow, I know it hurt me, right? It could be a myriad of things. It could be small little things here and there, or it could be one big I saw something on TV and it really resonated with me. I used to love blow them up, shoot them action movies. Not so much.
No, huh?
Yeah.
And your final message to men and women that may be dealing with it right now and haven't come forward, what would you tell them?
Find somebody. Find somebody that you trust and be willing to open up so that they can make a connection with you. They can say, I'm here for you. Because I did that. I found 2 people within my agency who I've known for a very long time and opened up to them. And they still, to this day, check in on me every few weeks. And so I would tell that first responder, they just need to be willing to trust somebody. Trust is the biggest part. Once we can find somebody, then the process really begins. The process of finding the services, the process of going to the command staff and saying, hey, this officer, this firefighter, this EMT needs help. 2 years ago, that's what happened with me. I opened up to one of my buddies who was within the command staff, and I said, I need help. And I need help to go to the upper management and tell them what's going on. And he said, no problem, I'll call you back. He made some phone calls, and then we made a meeting. And from there on, there was nothing but support for me. So the biggest message is find somebody to trust and be willing to open up. It's not easy, but be willing.
Thanks for taking the time.
Thank you for having me.
Honor meeting you.
Appreciate it.